and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we are doing the unfortunate pod of talking about the college football playoff rankings and how it relates to UM. So we'll cover the actual rankings later, but right now, Miami is the first team out. They rank number 12, and number 11 is Alabama. And folks, it is what it is. The committee, ESPN, have clearly stated what this ranking system is about. I've told you before multiple times in this podcast that this was an SEC and Big Ten invitational. And other conferences are lucky to get a piece of the pie. All you're saying with ranking Alabama right now at number 11 is that brand matters more than anything. Unfortunately, UM is not a big brand right now. They are a big brand in the history of college football, but right now, Alabama is clearly the bigger brand. There's no... All right, I need to calm myself down here. I'm not going to be as upset as I was for the FSU snub last year, but it's 2 years in a row where you've had more qualified teams, i.e. my alma mater in UM and my favorite team in FSU, be kicked out for Alabama. And this year is more egregious in the sense of the talking points against it. Last year, FSU was undefeated. There was no argument. That's it. They won with their backup and they won with their third string. What they're doing now with these rankings is making about hypotheticals rather than the results on the field. And that sets a dangerous precedent. Did UM leave the door open? Yes. By losing 2 out of their last 3 games. But let's not forget about what Alabama's done either. Let's not forget. We're looking at a team that lost 40-35 to Vanderbilt. This is a Vanderbilt team that went 6-6 and finished 11th in the SEC. Only Oklahoma, Auburn, Kentucky, and Mississippi State were worse than them. And oh, by the way, that same Oklahoma team that finished 6-6, that same Oklahoma team, Alabama, lost 24-3. And then you lose 24-17 to Tennessee. I mean, you can point at the Georgia win, but let's really break down this schedule. Western Kentucky, 63-0. Cool. South Florida was a 42-16 game. And if you really want to dive into that, folks, that game was a very close game up until I think like 8 minutes left in the game. And they kind of ran all over them. I'm going to look at it real quick. It was 21-16 with 6:45 left to play. And then the final score is 42-16. I mean, folks, that's not, the final score is not indicative of what actually happened in that game. You go face Wisconsin, 42-10 win at Wisconsin. That's fine. That's a good win. You can't knock that win, even though Tyler Van Dyke got injured and all that stuff. But again, you went to Wisconsin, you played that game. But folks, touching back on that South Florida game, that's a common opponent between Alabama and UM. UM won 50-15, 42-16, 50-15. You go up 31-7 or whatever it was against Georgia, 37, you win 41-34. You beat South Carolina 27-25. You lose to Tennessee. You beat Missouri 34-0. One of the most overrated teams in the country is Missouri. You beat LSU 42-13. And LSU clearly isn't the same team this year as they've been the past few years. There's a lot going on with that program right now. Same team that lost to USC. Same team that's gone 8-4. You face Mercer. You lose to Oklahoma. And then you face an Auburn team and you win 28-14 despite your best efforts to lose that game and committing multiple turnovers and losing, I believe, 3 of them. I mean, it's honestly the brand, folks, because you can't say that Alabama has looked that impressive this year. Your job is to win. UM lost to Georgia Tech, who again took Georgia to its limits. And you lost to a Syracuse team that is now ranked by this playoff committee. There is nothing about that Oklahoma loss that you can cover up. But they did. This committee covered it up. And what doesn't help, too, is, again, the ESPN chatter throughout the weeks, planting the seeds the same way they did last year. I mean, even in this broadcast, you had Reese Davis comparing referee calls helping Miami to Alabama's 21-point loss to Oklahoma. How is that even remotely close to the same thing? It just doesn't make sense. And again, the 21-0 lead for UM just rings even worse now. But I think what's how can I put what's the most eye-popping thing about this is that Miami dropped farther for losing on the road to an 8-3 team than Ohio State did for losing at home to a 6-5 Michigan team. And by the way, Ohio State, for all its talent, scored 10 points that game. And we've already discussed on this podcast what I thought about that game plan. But it is absolutely insane that happened. And you can say, I think they were trying to justify it. Alabama's win against 500 teams or better. What? Why do we have to quantify it that way? And you're talking about the ranked teams that Alabama's gone up against. It's the SEC bias that's built in, folks. It's the SEC having that arm in ESPN. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't pushing some sort of weird narrative. There are plenty of folks out there, national media members, who acknowledge this. I mean, how do you get to the point where you can say that the SEC is head and shoulders above every other conference when you've got Kentucky, who put Georgia to the limit, Kentucky, who beat Ole Miss 4-8, Auburn, who beat Texas A&M 5-7, Oklahoma, who beat Auburn and Alabama for their only 2 SEC wins, 6-6. Florida, who's the darling right now of everybody, 7-5. Missouri, Ole Miss, South Carolina. You know what the difference between them is? Preseason hype. They're all 9-3. South Carolina is probably one of the hottest teams in the country right now with 6 straight wins. But it doesn't matter because they lost early. And you know what? They're not a big enough brand, folks. That's a difference, is the branding. You want to look at the ACC? Duke, 9-3, not even sniffing the rankings. Louisville, 8-4, didn't sniff the rankings either. Syracuse at 9-3 gets in. You got SMU 11-1, Clemson 9-3, Miami 10-2, Syracuse 9-3, Louisville 8-4, Georgia Tech 7-5, probably the more impressive 7-5 teams in the country. Duke 9-3. Damn, worst team's Florida State. But still, I mean, you can't lose to Georgia Tech apparently, but you can lose 24-3 to Oklahoma. So, again, these rankings just, again, pretty much just show you the game. And Ward Manuel, one of the members of the committee, said, "We will not adjust these teams, so it's over for Miami. The Hurricanes aren't going to make the college football playoffs. The only way the adjustments are going to be..." And by the way, folks, the cherry on top will be what happens in the ACC championship game. If Clemson beats SMU, they get a bid because they won one of the Power Four conferences. So they will get into the playoffs. What do you do with SMU at 11-2 if they lose to Clemson? The committee has stated, not unequivocally, but they have implied that it will be unfair to punish teams for playing that extra game in these championship games. So if SMU loses, do they dare put Alabama over them? A 2-loss team that lost in the championship game. That will be the most interesting scenario. Because the Big 12 is going to get in, whoever wins that. And if Boise State wins, they're going to get a bye because they're going to be the highest ranked group of 5. So they're in. But, oh boy, what fun times right now, folks. What fun times. And it's just another year of them straight up telling you what it's all about. It's about the biggest brands. Running down the ratings or the rankings real quick. Memphis at 25, Army, Colorado, Syracuse, Illinois, UNLV, Missouri, BYU, Clemson at 17, Iowa State and Arizona State are both 16 and 15, and they're going to be the ones battling out for the Big 12 championship. 14, South Carolina, 13, Ole Miss, Miami at 12, Alabama, Boise State, Indiana, SMU at 8, Tennessee at 7, Ohio State at 6, Georgia at 5, Notre Dame at 4, Penn State at 3, Texas at 2, Oregon at 1. Oh, man, folks. Just that Michigan loss did nothing for Ohio State. And again, what the committee is saying with these rankings is that the actual results on the field do not matter. As long as we perceive you to be a better team, you're fine. Ohio State, I've said it multiple times throughout the year, has one of the most talented rosters in college football. The same thing with Georgia. So therefore, in the committee's eyes, they are given more leeway with their losses. Indiana was not. And even though, again, they're still ranked in the top 10 at number 9, they have one loss. And that one loss gave them so much of a penalty that even though you can only play the schedule that puts in front of you, and yeah, it was a bad loss. It was a 37-15 loss or something along those lines. But tell me which loss is worse, that or that Michigan-Ohio State loss. But yeah, the top 4, 5, 6, the top 4 you can't really argue. Oregon obviously needs to be number 1. Texas, because of the SEC bias, they're going to be ranked number 2, even though their schedule, they had an incredible luck in how the schedule was generated for them in the SEC. But they're 11-1. Penn State, again, the one team that they faced, they lost to, but they're 11-1. Notre Dame, everybody's forgotten about the NIU loss. So, but man, folks, this 11 and 12 ranking is just absolutely insane to me. It's all about the brand. Don't you forget it. This is going to be about how many of these Big Ten and how many of these SEC schools can get into this. And especially it's the SEC schools, because ESPN owns the rights to SEC programming for college football. Fox has the Big Ten. And yeah, ESPN also has the ACC rights as well. But it's clear even after last year that they don't really care about the ACC. There's no brand currently in the ACC, especially with Florida State dropping the ball this year. Clemson, UM are good teams. Yes. SMU is a good team. Yes. But when we're talking about brands, and those are good brands in college football, we're talking about the ratings and how they drive them. FSU is the only ratings monster in the ACC. UM is not. Clemson is not. Neither is SMU. Miami's had some good ratings this year. One of them was with UM. One of them was with FSU. Same thing with Clemson. There's not a lot of games that these teams can stand alone by themselves and draw ratings. And that's what happened here. But you blew an opportunity to have a Notre Dame UM matchup in the first round. But these aren't the final rankings, folks. We'll see those come out next week after the championship Saturday. And you'll have the rankings come out Sunday. We'll do another recording about that. Maybe after National Signing Day, I'll echo some more sentiments about this rankings for this week. But we're also going to have National Signing Day tomorrow. We'll try and get some content out for that for both FSU and UM. And yeah, despite my general attitude or how my voice sounded on this pod, it is fun times recording this stuff. Gets the blood flowing, folks. This is what it's all about in college football. These discussions, these just tribal nature of these teams that their people are so fond of and care about so much. And this is why it makes college football so special. That's it for today's episode, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for stopping by. You know the drill. You can find us on YouTube. Subscribe, like, turn those notifications on. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. Do the same thing there. Like, subscribe, follow. Turn the notifications on. Spotify as well. All that good stuff. So, thanks for listening to this episode, folks, and we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.